Hey guys, so before we get started with the listing presentation, I just wanted to mention, so we're not actually going to have the camera follow us around a house and do the full-blown thing, but when you get to the house, you're going to obviously want to greet your client. But then the first thing that we like to do is ask them, can you take us for a tour around your house? You'll want to do the outside. Obviously, if they're elderly or whatnot and it's snowing out, maybe not a great idea, but you want to at least get around the house once. Uh, Take notes while you're doing that. Good things, the bad things. You're going to want to have those for when you're ready to list the home. Anything that you think of, anything that stands out, you're going to want to take that down. Once you come inside the house and you're walking around with them, make sure to compliment them on something or a couple things while you're going through the house. It really, it's important. They've lived in this home. This is their home. So let them know that you can appreciate the layout of the house, the colors of this room, the way that they have it decorated, something about it, location. If you can't figure out anything else, maybe location or something. Um, when you're taking notes in front of the client, sometimes it helps to let them know what you're taking notes about, assuming it's not a bad thing, because they can get really nervous sometimes when you're just jotting stuff down all the time. So let them know, oh, I love the color of this room. I'm going to just write down that you have, 3 bedrooms here, or whatever the detail is. You probably know that stuff already because you've pulled the CMA, but I'm just throwing that out there. So we're going to get into it now. Jackie and I are going to actually do a uh, listing presentation. Jackie's going to go through the CMA, and we're actually going to show you from beginning to end what that looks like.
Thank you so much for taking me through the home. It's beautiful. You guys have clearly done a ton of work, and I can really appreciate that. So, tell me a little bit about how you got to this point of deciding to have a realtor into your home, deciding that now's the time to sell.
Yeah.
Just kind of take me through that thought process. And
So
if you don't
this,
mind, I'm going to take a
yeah,
couple notes while we're
no,
talking so that
that's
I can refer back
perfect,
to them.
perfect. So this is our first home.
Okay.
We bought it purposefully because it was a fixer-upper. It was within our price range. We knew that it would need a lot of different work, mostly cosmetic stuff. We've done most of that now, but now we have kids, 3 of them, and it is getting too small. The idea always was that we would sell and use that equity or whatever we pull out of this property and put it into another house. So now we're just looking for that next house, really,
Okay.
and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, let me take you through a little the process of selling and what that looks like, and tell you a
Okay,
little bit about us so that you know how we work and what we do marketing wise and strategically to get your home sold.
awesome.
And stop me if you have any questions along the way.
Okay,
So this tells you a little bit about us, gives you a little bit of background. My husband and I met when we were in college, and right out of college we started a construction company. So he got into home repair, remodeling, and then ultimately some new build construction addition realms. And that gives me, as we're going through the house, a deep appreciation for everything you've done remodeling wise. But it also gives me a understanding and a more in-depth knowledge of how those remodeling and projects and repairs will calculate to your bottom line in terms of the adjustments that we'll make to
okay,
make sure
that'll be
that
helpful.
you're priced accordingly.
Gotcha.
It also tells you a little bit about us when it comes to our marketing. We drive home technology as a major focus when it comes to selling your home. There are some homes, some ranches in different areas that do require some more print marketing, but for the most part, with the type of buyer you're looking for, with the size family, that you're probably looking for in terms of the buyer for this house, technology is going to be a huge piece when it comes to getting the biggest pool of buyers that we can, which will ultimately get you the highest price and the lower days on market. Does that make
Gotcha.
sense?
Yep.
It also tells you a little bit about us when it comes to communication. Communication is one of our major focuses. It's very important to us that you always have accessibility to us,
Gotcha.
but that at the same time we're able to keep you organized and on track. And so we use different systems like the Matrix portal when it comes to buying. I know at the end of this we're going to go over your requirements when it comes to looking for a property. We're going to get you set up with an MLS search.
Okay.
And it's really important to us that we have the systems in place so that you can reach out to us via Matrix, via text, via phone call, via email, whatever way, whatever method you need. We're always on the same page. When it comes to the selling of your house, we use for showings the online showing service called Showing Time so that you can track. It's hooked up right through Matrix. You can track all of your showings. You get alerts, and we're in constant communication with you on feedback.
So I'll know when somebody's coming to see the house then.
Always. And we'll cover that in a second.
Awesome.
But it's very important to us to implement the use of systems so that we're always on the same page and we're always in touch with you.
Gotcha.
Does that
Very
make sense?
Cool. Yeah.
So this covers the 3 things we can control. And this is the most important part of this whole conversation is the 3 things we can control are the condition of your home, the marketing, and the price. And when those 3 things are in line, the house sells within the average days on market for the average price per square foot and about where we're going to be quoting you here and adjusting for.
Okay.
So when those 3 things are in line and in sync, that's what happens. If something is off, so if we price a little bit too high, that may increase the days on market or reduce your sale price because it may be sitting long enough that somebody starts to come in with a lower bid.
Okay.
With the marketing, we'll show you how we really capitalize on all of our marketing to make sure that we're driving home as many buyers as possible. We're getting as much exposure as possible. So that should bring us the showings. In this area, for every 10 showings you get, we should have an offer. It's a little bit more rural. So in cities, it might be closer to like 5 to 7 showings. But because we're in a more rural area right where you are, it's probably going to be closer to like 8 to 10 showings. And then we should get an offer. If we're not getting the showings, then that can sometimes speak to the marketing. So we might have to tap into other marketing channels. Gotcha. But if we're getting those showings, then it usually is tied to either price or condition of your home.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
These are some things you can do right before listing, little things to just maximize your home's appeal. Little things like planting some hostas or mums out front, putting some mulch down. We're getting into spring, so it's the perfect time to really bump that curb appeal up.
Gotcha.
Cleaning up any power washing the house because you have a white house and it's just been winter and you've probably been hit hard with the wind. Getting that power wash, just those cleaning up the exterior and the interior.
Yep.
Clean and organized houses sell faster. So if you can keep them organized and keep the house organized and decluttered so that the space looks bigger, that's really going to be the biggest thing we have going for us.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
This takes you through our 9-step marketing plan. So the first thing we do is we price your home strategically. And at the end of this packet, we'll go through the comparative market analysis and go through what we would recommend pricing it at. And we have a range.
Yep.
So we obviously price it strategically. Now, when we get to that point, we'll have more of a conversation about what your goals are, because pricing it strategically involves us knowing what is the most important thing to you. Is it timing? Is it price? So we'll go through that.
Okay.
We also do professional photos. We use a camera called a Matterport, and we don't use, it's not, for every house. It's not every house requires it, but we do have a available Matterport within our brokerage to shoot your home with. And what it does is as you can see here, it's more than just a walkthrough. It literally is the technology that Google Maps uses to walk down the road. So it allows people, captures professional photography photos, but it also allows people to walk through your house.
Okay.
So it basically qualifies the house before they come and waste anyone's time to find out that when they walk in the door, they don't want this layout.
Gotcha.
And you've just cleaned and you've gotten your kids out and you've gone through all that hassle to find out that this wasn't even the right layout for them.
Okay.
But it also appeals to people out of state, because now instead of hopping on a plane, most people aren't going to hop on a plane just to see if maybe a house will be a good fit.
Right.
It really allows them to walk through it, make sure it's a good fit before they even schedule that, and then they're more likely to come and seriously look at it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing that does, though, is it increases your ranks on when it comes to when people search, Bloomfield homes for sale.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to rank higher than videos because it's a walkthrough. So really our whole game here is trying to get the most views as possible.
Okay.
And because this increases your rate, it puts you up higher as like number one when people search that, it'll get us more traffic, which is really what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we do that. We put out the for sale sign. We blast out to over 350 websites. The big ones are Realtor, Trillia, Zillow, those top three. But then there are over, 350 other sites that we blast out to, again, just to increase that traffic. We won't get the amount of traffic on those sites that we get on Zillow, but if anyone's looking, we just want to make sure that any site that anyone is looking on, we capture them. Does
Gotcha.
that make sense?
Yep.
So we do that. And we also advertise in our email campaigns, in our property websites, and in our direct mailing that we do. We also do an open house schedule. So usually we like to do it as long as you're comfortable with that. Some people don't like open houses. And it's not that it necessarily is what sells your house. Like, very rarely do people come in and right at the open house put in an offer.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets it out there. It gets people talking about it. It gets your neighborhood aware that your house is for sale. It gets them, hey, I'm at the, what are you doing? I'm at my friend's open house right now.
Gotcha.
It
Yep.
just gets word of mouth out there a little more.
Right,
Some
right.
people don't think it's worth it. They don't want to inconvenience their Sunday,
Yeah.
but it can only help when it comes to word of mouth.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we get that on the schedule. And then lastly, we really work to call and make sure we get in touch with the area agents that we've worked with to let them know, hey, we have this listing coming on the market. Do you have any buyers? I know your buyers have purchased a house like this in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anyone you're working with that's looking for this?
Gotcha.
So we strategically reach out to those connections that we think will bring a buyer.
Okay.
The last thing that we do when it comes to accountability in this is we found that a lot of sellers we were talking to, who had tried realtors before or who had listed with other realtors before, when I'd ask them what was your biggest hang up with them, or why didn't you hire them this time, they'd say, well, I just didn't feel like they were doing anything. And some of the agents we'd worked with before, and I said, oh my gosh, they work so hard.
Yeah.
But what I found is that they weren't communicating that with their seller. So what we do is we provide you with a weekly report so that you can see, okay, wow, I'm getting this much traffic on these websites. Okay,
that'd be
I've had
nice.
these showings, and this is the feedback we've gotten,
Right.
so that you know what we're doing to actively get it sold.
Okay.
And you know what the traffic is.
Mhm.
This
Good deal.
goes through our showings. So like I said, we use Showing Time. And what Showing Time does is they reach out to you, whether it's via text, call, or email, directly, so that it takes me out of the middle. That way, especially going into such a hot market, I'm sitting here with you. I might be sitting with another seller, or I might be sitting with you on a showing,
Right.
and somebody's calling to try to get into your listing. I can't answer right away,
Yeah.
but we need to get them in quickly. So
Right.
they reach out directly to you. It's a third-party service, and they're not automated, so it's not like a robocaller. It's a real person. They say, hey, John Doe from XYZ Brokerage wants to show your house at 2:30 tomorrow. Is that okay?
Gotcha.
And you can either say, yep, that works, or you can say, oh gosh, that's not going to work. I can't get everyone out in time. Just know that when you go to reschedule, you do run the risk of losing that showing. So
Okay.
if there's any way to make it work for that buyer, although it seems inconvenient, and it probably is,
Try to get them in.
try to get them in,
Okay.
because the more buyers we can get in the beginning, the faster it'll be to get it sold. And then
Makes
you won't
sense.
even have to worry about buyers.
Right. Right.
So the more we reschedule, the longer it takes to get it sold, the longer we drag out this whole showing process.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And you'll have a website. That's the other nice thing about Showing Time, is that you'll be able to see all of the showings and when they are. So
Oh,
you
that'd
don't
be
have to
nice.
keep track on a calendar.
Yeah.
They're right there. You know when to
Okay.
prep, and safety wise, it allows us to know everyone who comes through.
Awesome.
All the agents, they only get the key code for the lockbox, because we put a lockbox right on the front
If they
with the key.
schedule it through.
They have to schedule it through there. We have to
Perfect.
validate their license, and then they get the key code.
Gotcha.
So safety wise, it makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah.
This also goes through, like I had talked about, the Matterport. We also have a drone available within our brokerage. This is a really small lot, and I don't know if it would be, it's not so much about the size, but because you're closer to the neighbors, I don't know if we would want to highlight, because people who are looking in this area look for privacy. Hey, look, we're right next to the neighbor here. So it may not be a good fit, but it's always available if you'd
Mhm.
like to use it.
Okay. Awesome.
And we have an in-house drone certified pilot that
Okay.
the only thing about these two pieces are that obviously it's someone within our brokerage who has to do them.
Gotcha.
So, because the Matterport requires a certain way of shooting, and because the drone requires an FAA certified pilot.
So it'd be somebody other than you coming out
Right.
to do. Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So just a note for that. We also blast out to all of the social media channels. So when it comes to the social media channels, we do YouTube, Google Plus, all of those things. And again, that's just a way to get it out there and make sure it's on all of those sites that people are looking at.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yep.
This is an example of those reports that you get every week.
Oh, nice.
So you
okay.
can really compare them. You have a market comparison to
So
be
it
able
actually
to say.
breaks down all the main websites
Yep.
right there, like Zillow, and telling me how many clicks,
Yeah,
right?
yep.
Okay.
How many clicks you're getting every week.
Ah, interesting.
Yep, and it
Well,
shows
that's
you a
nice.
market comparison to see how you're ranging and comparing against other properties that are similar to yours.
Now, I don't really know. I mean, for me, it's interesting, but I'm assuming you use that
Yes.
information.
So the important piece when it comes to those statistics are if we at some point have to do a price adjustment, for example, depending on where we list and how we fall, if we need to do a price adjustment, we always recommend that it be within the first 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
Because as we'll see
Okay.
here in one of these graphs, the first 30 days are when you're going to get the most showings and the most attention.
Okay.
So we really try to capitalize on that first 30 days in finding a buyer.
Gotcha.
So in order to keep momentum in that first month,
Right.
we always recommend a price adjustment if necessary in the first 2 weeks. But we don't know if it's necessary until we look at these market statistics and look at the feedback, because it might just require that we wait another week before we get an offer. And we don't
Gotcha.
want to reduce just because you're not getting an offer.
Right.
But if the statistics are showing, look, people are looking at your property and then bouncing to another property that's lower,
Right.
but everything else is equal about it,
Okay.
or the buyers are coming through and saying, I love it, but it just seems overpriced consistently,
Okay.
then we would recommend the adjustment. But we never want to adjust unless the statistics and the feedback call for it.
I like that. That makes sense.
These are just some of the websites that we blast out to. I can't fit 350 on here,
Right.
unfortunately.
I recognize a bunch of
Yep,
those.
these are the top 3: Realtor,
Sure.
Zillow, Trillia. And
Yep.
these are just some of the other ones. Because
Okay.
we're in a rural area, it's really nice to be on Homes and Land, things like that, websites like that where people are looking for more rural areas.
Okay.
Any questions about any of the
No.
marketing? Because we're about
Nope.
to launch into pricing.
Yeah. No, that sounds good.
So this is an example of how we price. So we have market value here. Usually if we're going into a fall or winter market, we'll recommend, depending on how long you need to sell, if you have to be out within the average days on market, or if you're buying a place and you need to be out in a short time frame, we recommend pricing a little bit under, because you have less of a market to deal with and to work with. You have less buyers, and so therefore we need to price a little bit under to be able to capture them within the time frame you're looking. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah. I mean, 15%, that's a lot.
Well,
though.
15% is more for just a fire sale situation. If you were going into
So
foreclosure,
that's like kind of an extreme.
yeah.
So like
5 to
5%
maybe 10,
maybe.
depending on how fast you had to sell. If you were under
Okay.
contract on a house and you had 2 weeks to get it sold, we
gotcha.
might recommend 10%. 5% is typically just because we're going into winter and we need to sell within 1 to 2 months.
Right.
But
Okay.
15 is really more for you're in foreclosure. We really have a
We gotta-
very tight window,
We
or
gotta
else there's a
go.
lot at stake.
Gotcha. Okay.
10 to 15% above is where we recommend when it comes to going into a spring market. 15 is a little high. That's for really more if appreciation has been really pretty high over the last few years in
Or
this
I
area.
don't really care when I sell. It
Right,
could
you
be
can wait
year,
a
2
year, you can wait 2 years. Then you can get 15% above. Usually, 5 to 10% is the max, just because we're going into spring
Okay.
and people expect that it'll be a little bit
That
more,
makes sense.
and you have more buyers to work with.
Okay.
So that launches us into the first 30 days. You can see this chart and how in that first 30 days we have a ton of showings.
Mhm.
And then after 30 days, it really starts to level out and to actually plummet pretty quick. And that's because as we're going to, at the end of this, get into the buyer piece of it and talk about what you're looking for, we're going to set you up on an MLS search. I'm sure you've been looking at Zillow and Trillia.
Yep.
Well, all of the buyers who are going to be looking at your house are as well. But they're also probably working exclusively with an agent of their choice. And they're getting immediate notifications from the MLS, where the database we're going to put your listing into. They're getting those notifications immediately. And so if their search is set up where it's 3 bedrooms minimum, and all matches what your house falls within, they'll know right away the minute we list it. So that means that that first 30 days is that existing pool of buyers. They're all getting notified. And the minute we've exhausted all of those buyers and showings,
Right.
then we just have anyone new who's coming to the market.
Okay.
So it really inhibits our ability to sell it for the most amount of money.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any questions so far?
No, everything's making pretty good sense for the most part.
Okay. This is a seller's net sheet. This is how much it's going to cost you to sell your house.
Okay.
So this breaks down all of the costs item by item. The first one is any mortgage that you have. Do you have a mortgage on the house?
I think we have like 50,000
Okay.
left. It's like 50, maybe $500. Yeah, 50,000.
Do you have a second mortgage or a
Nope.
HELOC? Okay, so 0 there. Broker's compensation, we charge a certain percentage. Half of that goes to us, half of that goes to whoever brings the buyer.
Okay.
So that's where we'd account for that here. Seller points, you're not in bankruptcy, are you?
No.
So we'll eliminate that. An attorney is typically about $350 to $500, depending on who you go with. All of these, by the way, are paid for out of your closing costs or out of your proceeds. So when you sell, they just are taken out. You don't have to pay it beforehand.
Okay.
The attorney is meant to just do all your title work. It's a flat fee, and like I said, he's generally $350. He or she is generally $350 to $500. If you don't have a real estate specific attorney that you work with, then we have a handful of them that we've worked with that we can recommend,
Awesome.
and they're within that price range.
Okay.
The abstract is typically about $350, and that is to update the history of the house so that it's in this new person's name and out of your name.
Okay.
Any survey, this property will probably be around $500 for a survey. Surveys range anywhere from $350 for like a postage stamp size
Mhm.
up to, thousands of dollars if you have 20, 30, 40, hundreds of acres.
Gotcha.
You're right within that. You're, only 1 to 2 acres. So we're going to put 500. That should cover that. It might, depending on who they hire, get to, 600, but you're not going to be beyond that. And when you select an attorney, they can generally say who they use and how much they're going to be.
Perfect.
Revenue stamps are $4 per every 1,000, and that is to record that you've sold your house.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Okay.
So depending on what it sells for, it's $4 per 1,000 off of that. The only thing this doesn't include are taxes. So if you don't pay your taxes in your mortgage payment,
Okay.
then you have to pay the prorated amount for that year.
Gotcha. That
Does that
makes
make
sense.
sense?
Yep.
So you would just add all of that up, come up with your total here, and then take it off of your sales price.
Okay. Perfect.
I can also send you a spreadsheet that we have that does it automatically. When you plug in the sales price, it calculates all of those costs.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then you
that'd
can
be
kind of
awesome.
play with those numbers. You can say, okay, what if I sold for 15,000 under that? And it'll
Right.
show you your net.
So it just helps me to run a couple scenarios.
Right.
Okay.
Especially for the house you're purchasing, because I know you're going to be using this for down payment and closing costs. It kind of shows you, okay, I'm still within the scope I need to be at.
Gotcha. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
These are just testimonials to show you that there are people out there that like us.
Good deal.
Any questions about that?
No?
Okay. Let's go through the pricing.
Okay.
This is also just so you know, I have a resource directory. If
Mhm.
at any point you need a professional for, like I said, an attorney, an accountant, handyman,
Yep.
anything like that. I know you have well and septic, so at some point you'll have to get well and septic pumpings and inspections, which
Okay.
we'll talk about in a couple minutes.
Gotcha.
But they're all on there.
Gotcha.
Any resource that you might need for your home, those are all professionals that we've worked with, that we recommend. And if you have any issues with them, please let us know, because that's why we put the list together, so that we would be accountable to each other for the quality of service that they provide and that we
Gotcha.
provide.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
This goes through the properties that are comparable to yours. So it goes through the pricing and the range you're going to fall within. Now, when you see the numbers, don't get assumptions or anything like that in your head, because there were adjustments that had to be made. So you're
Okay.
going to have a low end and a high end, and then you're going to have an in between. So your house is going to fall right above the middle. You're going to be
Okay.
right in between the middle and the high end.
So for the homes that you pulled, I'm kind of a little bit above the average.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
By about 20% above the average.
Okay.
So the low end is really, everything is old carpeting, clean, but it's all outdated. It's, older carpeting. There's some wallpaper, a couple big ticket items. the siding on some of the houses
And
needed
that's
to
for
be
the
replaced.
low end
And
homes.
that's all the low end homes.
Okay.
So, and I'll show you pictures at the end of the different homes
Oh, perfect.
to show
Okay.
you why you fall within that.
Okay.
You have some hardwoods, mostly just clean, nice carpet and linoleum throughout. I know that some of your laminate and linoleum is new,
Yeah.
and that's appropriate for the price range. But then you have some upgraded, like your kitchen is
Right. I was
upgraded.
going to ask about
You
that.
know,
Yeah.
kitchen and baths. That's the place that you get the most money.
Good. So we spend it in the right place.
Yeah. So your
Good.
kitchens and baths, they're upgraded. They're putting you more towards the higher end, but you're not. So you're not in the middle, which would
Okay.
be, you know, builder grade, newer, but builder grade everything. You did
Right.
granite countertops. You did, you know, the nice bowl vessel sinks. Like you really capitalized on those upgrades. So you're
Okay.
going to be just above that. But then
Okay.
the highest price per square foot is going to require things like hardwood floors throughout.
Okay.
You know, it's going to require certain certain layouts, just things that would be cost prohibitive to change.
Right.
A more open family and kitchen area.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
So that's what I'm looking at as we go through and talk about that
Excited to
range.
see the pictures here.
I know. So the first one was right on Bent Oak. It was, you know, not far from here. And then the other one was on Morning View. And if you look through, you can really see we had to adjust for example, the square footage. I mean, this had significantly more square footage than yours has.
So we're taking
You're taking
away from that
Right.
comparable then.
Right.
I see.
because
Okay.
when you have more square footage, obviously we have to mess with
We're
that.
bringing
But
it down
they
to
also didn't have the upgrades in the baths and the beds, or in the baths and the kitchen, and they didn't have the same number of bedrooms that you do.
Oh,
So we
okay.
had to add that back in.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
when we did that, it comes up with at the end. It says it here, but then
I
it
see.
averages
Yep.
it at the end, so you'll see the range that we just
Gotcha.
talked about.
Okay.
And then on Morning View, this one had again significantly more square footage.
Yeah.
So we had to take that out.
Mm-hmm.
And it also had an extra bedroom. So we had to take that out. But we had to add in those adjustments for the baths because, again, that was on the lower end quality wise for the baths and the kitchen.
Okay.
This next one that we have, this is all of your information, your
Yep.
house information. Next one that we had on Matthew Drive, that one again had more square footage. It also had an extra bath. And it was pretty comparable. That was actually a very comparable one when it came to the quality. So that landed you right in the average there. And then the last one that didn't have the garage that you have.
Mhm.
So we had to add in for the garage. It didn't have the barn, the outbuilding that you have. So we
Mhm.
had to add back in for that. But it did have more square footage again. So what we're finding too is that your home in this area for comparables is on the lower end of the price per square of the square foot.
But that's not
So
a bad thing because
it's-
our return. Yeah.
right, you
Yeah.
put money into your baths and your bedrooms, so you're
Right.
still in a good spot with your square footage. It's just lower than some of these other ones.
Okay.
And then we had a couple more over here. There was one right on Hamilton, but that one had a lot more in the way of upgrades than yours did. It had about the same square footage, but it was heavily upgraded. Very open floor plan, hardwoods throughout,
Okay.
and beautiful baths and kitchen. So that
Okay.
was the highest. That was the best one for the highest end square footage price per square foot. On Waterford Way, we had one, and that put you right about in the middle there. Again, a little bit more square footage, but not by much,
Mhm.
and pretty comparable in the way of baths and kitchens. And it did have, again, one more bedroom, but all the beds were pretty small in that one. So it
Okay.
was actually pretty equivalent to 3 beds, but just larger. You know what I
Gotcha.
mean?
Yeah.
Any questions about those comparables?
No, that all makes sense.
I really like to have a minimum of 3 comparables, and it's
Yeah.
nice because here we were able to pull 5. Some rural areas, I have to go out and I get like 2, and that's good.
I can only
So,
imagine. Yeah.
It was good to have that selection to choose from. So if you see here on the lowest end, we're looking at like 165
Okay.
on the low end. On the high end, you're really capping out at about 210, 215. And then right in the middle, you're going to come in at like probably 185 to 2.
Okay.
That's really going to be your max. 2 is probably going to be a little high. I
Mhm.
would recommend, for a spring market listing, 199 is the highest price.
Okay.
But if you, depending on the time frame you're looking for and how fast you want to sell, that will also direct what we price it at. So do you, let me ask you something. If you could sell in 2 weeks, or if you could sell within a certain amount of time, would you take less money to be able to do that?
Probably. I mean, a couple thousand. Really, no. I'd really like to get the price and that at least that I have in mind. I mean, if it was a difference of 4 or 5 months, then yeah, I might take a little bit less. But I don't mind if it takes 6 months, even 8, 9 months
Okay.
to sell. I'm fine with that.
Is there a price point in your head that you're like, this is what I really wanted to get, this is what I need to be at, this is
I mean, the net sheet's going to help me kind of like
Yeah.
dial it in. So I'm glad you have that. But I really kind of curious what you're going to come up with. But in the back of my mind, I really, really minimum need to be at 175.
okay.
That's kind of not that I have to be there, but that would give me enough to roll into the properties that I've been looking at. And
Right.
again, I know it depends on the lender too,
Right.
but I think that would give me a good chunk because I really don't want my mortgage payment to change much when
Right.
when we upgrade here to
Right.
this larger home.
Right.
So,
So, like I wouldn't recommend over 199, but
Mhm.
pending everything and the thing as we were going through the house, I know I suggested making a little bit of y- not repairs, but just touching up some of the
Okay,
wall,
yeah,
do deep cleaning,
do
all of
that.
that, the things that we discussed when we were going through.
Mhm.
If you can get all those things done, I would say 199. If you were just to say, nope, I'm just going to list it the way it is, I wouldn't go over 185. I would
Okay.
probably stay at 184.9.
Okay.
But if you can get all those other things done, 199 would be the max I would say we could list at.
Okay.
And then we just have to be strategic about those first 2 weeks. If we are getting a lot of feedback and the numbers like we talked about are
Mhm.
showing that it's a little high, I usually recommend a $5,000 to $10,000 price reduction
Okay.
to get you to keep momentum
Yep.
going. And I think 10,000 would keep you within the time frame you'd need
Mhm.
to be able to buy another house.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. This just goes through average days on market. You can see in this area, the average days on market falls around 30.
Okay.
So we're in a good spot there. And again, we want to make sure that we capitalize on that fast days on market by
Gotcha.
reducing if we have to in that first and adjusting in that first 30 days.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then this is just a summary of that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that all makes sense.
Okay. So tell me about your timeline. How fast do you want to list it? When are you ready to list it? What is your ideal list date?
I think it's for us really comes down to more when we find the right house. Because I'm if one was more important than the other, it's more important for us to find the right house than getting exactly what we need for this one. If we found the perfect home, then I would become more motivated and would probably take a little bit less
Right.
to make that happen.
Okay.
I realize that when you buy and sell, you're going to have to give up on one end or the
Yes,
other.
there's always something.
Because I'm going to have to, yeah. So that I would say that probably.
Okay.
Would-
So what we can do is when you find something,
Mhm.
we will obviously, because we won't, so it sounds, let me kind of play out a couple scenarios for you because this can work a couple different ways. You can we can list the house
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
without having found something and just say that all offers need to be subject to finding suitable housing within so many days.
Okay.
Usually it's like between 30 and 60 days.
Okay.
We'll be able to find a house.
Okay.
That way we don't lose the pre and the spring market.
Yeah, and that I really don't want to. I don't want to lose it. And
No.
And although we have an idea of what we want, I don't think it's going to be that hard. I mean, we're looking for colonials.
Right.
I mean,
And the
I
other
feel like
thing-
there's a bunch of those.
The other thing to have a conversation with your lender about is the ability to go non-contingent.
Mm,
So obviously we need to sell your home in the long run.
yeah.
But if you can qualify to carry both mortgages for just and get like a bridge loan or just pay for both mortgages for a
Right.
short period of time while we get this sold, if you can qualify for that, it will make you more competitive when you go to buy because we're in the spring market. There are a lot of buyers who are renters who are buying.
yeah.
So they don't have houses to sell. And
Okay.
when you have a house to sell, you basically you're just not as competitive because you can always be bumped. You can
Right.
essentially anyone who doesn't have that contingency can beat you out with that lack of
Well, I mean,
contingency.
we always have the option. We have a friend of mine that has like a very small guest house that,
Okay.
I mean, we could use that. I'm sure he'd be fine with that for like 2 to 3 months if we
Okay.
needed it.
So if
So-
for if worst case scenario you didn't find the house within the amount of time that we had, say we list your house in a week, we get a buyer 2 weeks later, we make it subject to finding
Mhm.
suitable housing basically
Right.
within 30, we'd say 45 days. And if we didn't find something, at least that could be a backup.
Assuming we find a place, how commonplace is it to actually line up the closings on the day or
It is almost near to next to nothing to it's very uncommon to get them on the same day.
okay.
But what we do is we build in either pre-possession into your new place
Okay.
or post-possession on the sale of this so that you can stay here maybe an extra 3 to 5 days.
That's not
But that
uncommon.
no, that you can get in there maybe 3 to 5 days sooner. So
Okay.
that at least you have some wiggle room and some time to
Okay.
get out of one to get into another. Because the minute you close, you have to be out of this house.
Gotcha. No, that sounds good. That
Does that
makes
make sense?
sense. That makes sense.
Okay. So would you prefer to do it that way where we really work on getting this sold first so we don't
Yeah.
lose the spring
Yep.
market?
Yep. I would
Okay.
much rather do that.
Then let's go through. Do you have a timeline? Do you want to shoot for next week? Do you want to wait a couple weeks so that you can get a couple of those other things done we had talked about?
I feel like we've got most of what we're going to get done.
Okay.
I
It's really just a
a
deep
little
cleaning.
bit of yeah, and
Okay.
I'll be able to do that.
Okay, so let's go through the listing paperwork.
Okay.
This just states your name, the property address, and our name and the brokerage name. And it states that we can represent you in selling the house. We can list the property.
Okay.
Now, in terms of pricing, where would you like, given what we just talked about, where would you like to be at?
You said 199. That would be a sale price, or that would be where you recommend listing.
The listing.
The listing.
Mhm.
Okay. What do you think sale I'm going to end up at?
Probably within 5,000.
Okay. That's beyond what I was hoping
Okay.
for.
And
so
again,
let's
It'll
do
be
that.
very important because that is on the high end. Within the first 2 weeks, we
Mhm.
just need to make sure we're really evaluating. And I always really hit home with those numbers on if the feedback is coming in that it's too high.
Now, because we don't have a place yet,
Mhm.
would it be a bad idea to maybe go 210 or 205,
Mhm.
and then, like you said, that first 2 weeks we could make an adjustment?
At this price point, I wouldn't go over. Now, if we were talking, you were at 180. I was recommending you list at 184.9, and you said, could we? I would say yes, that would be fine. It's not so much the margin as much as it is when you go over 200,000, your pool of buyers just got a lot smaller.
So that's kind of like
That's
100, 200.
Right.
Those are like kind
those
of
are big markers, even 250.
okay.
So I wouldn't recommend it. It's always up to you. You tell me what to do, and we'll just adjust accordingly if we have to. But I just know that would lose you a lot of the market that we're really working within.
No, I hear what you're saying, and
But I need you to be
yeah.
able to say, you know what, we did the best we could, and walk away knowing that, and not question yourself.
at least
So
we tried.
right. So if you need to be there, we'll do that. And
I'd like to start it at 205,
Okay.
just because we don't have a house
Yep.
even that we've even looked at that we know we want to move forward with.
right.
But I totally agree. If in the first week, if we haven't had the traction, let's
Right.
just get down to the 199 or
Right.
even 197 or whatever.
Okay.
But until I have a house, my motivation is a
Okay.
little bit lower.
Understood.
So
We'll start at 205, and if there's a buyer out there with all of the technology and the marketing we do, we will find them. If there's a buyer out there who will pay for that.
awesome.
So that takes you through the price. This goes through the commission amount that we talked about, and it breaks down that the different percentage is what is going to the buyer's agent, and that the other.
Person that brings the buyer.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. That this is the total commission amount that we discussed, but that half of that right here goes to whoever brings the buyer's agent, and half of that, or whoever brings the buyer, and then half of that goes to us as a listing agent.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I know every agent is different. Some agents only work with sellers, some
Mhm.
only work with buyers. Do you work with any buyers that you might bring?
We do. So if, for example, I have my own buyer, I work with buyers and sellers. So if my own buyer is interested in the property,
Mhm.
oftentimes I'll knock off like a percent for that because I'm representing both sides. However, there's a positive and a negative to that. And the positive is that you pay less in your overall commission. But the negative is that if I'm representing both sides, I can't offer guidance to either side.
Okay.
All I can do is say, tell me what to write in the contract to the buyer, tell me what to write in the contract, and then I walk it over to you and I say, tell me how to respond. I'm literally just a courier for this offer,
Okay.
and I can't advise or provide guidance because I know both of your situations. So
No,
it
that
would be a
makes sense.
conflict of interest. So the options I always give people are I can represent, if I have a buyer that's interested, I can always represent both sides and knock off, a certain percentage. Or if you're more comfortable and either party, the buyer or the seller, wants their own guidance, I can refer that buyer out to another agent within our brokerage or that I trust to represent that buyer. In that situation, you'd have to pay the full commission amount because
Right.
we now have to pay the other agent still,
Right.
But at least that way we would have that division of agency and
That doesn't really bother. I mean, I still would have my own attorney. They have
right,
their own attorney, and
right,
they're advising us on the contract through
right.
the attorney approval
Mhm.
window that you had said. So, no, that's not a problem. I
Okay.
was just curious how that works.
There are
and-
always options, but
Yeah.
it's whatever you're most comfortable with.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
This goes through giving us permission to be able to put a lockbox on the house because we put it right out front. It has a certain code that only agents that have verified licenses get access to.
Gotcha.
And that's so that they can get in to see it, that we can photograph the property, but that you're still technically responsible for property maintenance. We
Gotcha.
we
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
mow your lawn, unfortunately. This just states that financially you're able to sell the house. You're not 3 months or more behind in mortgage payments. You're not in default or in bankruptcy. And if that happens, you just have to tell us because that's a whole nother process that we
Okay.
have to go through. Okay.
Yep.
This is the code compliance. If there are any permits, when we walked through your house, I didn't see any additions, any finished basements, anything like that that require or that would be nice to have a permit for. I saw that you have a pool, but I know in this area they don't require a permit for that. So, do you have any permits that you know about?
No, I
Okay.
mean we did remodeling in the house, but
Okay. Well, we
I don't
always
even. I didn't know.
before we list the property, we always pull any permits on file with the town
Okay.
just to make sure that we have everything, so that if a buyer asks, I would like, well, did they get a permit for this or this? Everyone knows right out of the gate what permits are on what,
Perfect.
and that way we're all on the same page. So we'll
Okay.
just check beforehand and make sure. But if you find any in your paperwork or anything, just let me know.
Awesome.
This just goes through a summary of the whole contract, and it also states our fiduciary responsibilities to you, our how we're acting in your best interest.
Okay.
Everything that you tell us is confidential, and at the end of the day, all the paperwork that you give us is under lock and key.
Perfect.
Make sense?
Yep.
So what I'll do is I will put the target list date of next week right on here, and then this section is the only other piece that right under the target list date highlights how long our relationship is when it comes to listing the house. And I usually do 6 months, especially in the
That's
spring
fine.
market. It gives
That's
us
fine.
3 months to be able to find the buyer, then 3
Okay.
months to be able to get them closed.
What if? Because I know we're not pricing it exactly at the
Mhm.
199, and let's say we don't find anything, and what if we go beyond that 6 months?
We can always extend it.
Okay.
We can always extend it. And like I said, it gives us those 3 months for each to find the buyer and to get it sold. Usually it only takes about 2 months for each, but it gives us a little bit of wiggle room if
Mhm.
something comes up with the mortgage or anything like that.
Okay.
So you want to initial on the bottom of each page,
Mhm.
and then we'll sign on the last page. And then the only other piece that I have that you'll need to fill out, and I can leave this with you to do it, or you can do it while we're here,
Mhm.
is it's kind of lengthy. So it's a disclosure. It's a property condition disclosure, and it shows you everything that it basically asks you everything and anything that you know to be wrong with the house.
Gotcha.
There might be funny questions on here, like, have there ever been gas or oil tanks, in the ground? You can't know for the whole history of the house, but it's just to the best of your knowledge. And if you don't feel comfortable answering one of them, there's an unknown or an NA section.
Okay.
So-
So if I'm really not sure, I just.
Yep, you can just choose that option, but I will let you fill this out either. It's pretty long, so what you can do is just fill it out, and then when we come for pictures next week, we'll get that on the calendar right now.
Okay.
And you can give it to me at that point.
Sounds good.
Does that make sense?
Perfect.
All right.
Right.
Then at this point, we'll get into the buyer piece. We'll go into what you're looking for and get your search set up there, and we have all the listing piece squared away.
Perfect. That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to list.
So we wanted to mention two things in closing here now that you've watched the listing presentation. One of them is this is the CMA that Jackie had gone over with me. And typically, Jackie will actually take a lot of notes on the back of this. And there are two reasons for that. One, you should be taking notes while you're going through the home and while you're presenting the listing. But also, this is coming home with you. This is all of the information that Jackie would have left with the buyer, or the seller, I'm sorry. This is going to come home with you, and there's a really good reason for that. This has all of the details for the adjustments that you've made to the property. Now, if another agent is coming and doing an interview, a listing presentation with that person, it is very easy for them to sit there with that CMA that you prepared and pick it apart, or to glean information from it and just throw out the exact same price because maybe they're not as confident with their job as you are. So either way, it's not a good idea to leave this with them. The second reason is a seller may sit down with a glass of wine and decide that they're going to try to go through this and decipher all of it. That's a really bad idea. So you want to take this with you. Your CMA does not get left with them. Leave them with the listing presentation, not your CMA. And again, write notes on the back of it. Then it kind of makes it just a natural thing. You're taking your notes with you. The other thing Jackie wanted to mention is when going over asking the seller for the price. Jackie, if you wanted to jump in with when you do that.
So when you finish with the marketing that you're doing and you start to launch into those graphs when it comes to the pricing that take you into the CMA, I always, and I did this, but I did it a little late. You always want to look at the seller and say, so before we get into pricing, is there a certain price that you need to be at to make this sale work, or that you have in your mind that you really are shooting for? Because that way, although your pricing and your recommended pricing isn't going to change, you'll know how to present it to them. So if you are far off from their expectation, you'll be able to go into it knowing that, not be blindsided, and say, okay, so this is where we're falling. I know that this is under where you want to be significantly, but this is what will happen if we go as high as you want to go. You will actually lose money as you go along because we'll have to keep reducing, you'll lose the market, and so on. So always, before you go into any type of pricing, before you even open up the CMA, always try to get that information from them organically so that you know and you're not blindsided when going into the recommended pricing.
And I think the wording is so crucial when you're presenting or asking this question, because Jackie says it in a way that is, how do we help you get to where you want to go? What do we need to do with the price of this property and the pricing of this property to make your goals achievable? And by doing that, you're not coming across like, well, what do you want to list it for? Because they're going to look at you and say, well, that's your job. You tell me. And we don't want to set that up. We want them to know, because we are trying to help them reach their goals and attain those goals. So by asking it that way, you're not sitting on the other side of the table, which is one more point that I did want to bring up. Typically when presenting a listing presentation, although for the recording we're on opposite sides of the table, it's always ideal if you're really, really close to them.
There's a chair here and there's a chair here. So that there's just a corner in between you, so that you don't feel like you're on opposing teams.
Right.
You're on the same team and you're kind of coming up to them and saying, and here's what this looks like, and here's this, and here's your pricing, so that they feel a cohesiveness and a partnership there.
Yes. So it's little things like that that'll make a big difference. Obviously, if you're really close to somebody, you could sit right next to them, friend, family, things like that. But definitely being on opposite sides of the table, it doesn't mean that you're not getting the listing, but whenever avoidable, try to avoid it. So just a couple little quick tips. Can you think of anything additional to add to that?
No, that was it.
Okay, awesome. obviously, let us know if you guys have questions, and hope this helped a lot.